Welcome to another episode of the Indiana Hoosiers Roundtable podcast. I am Brandon Brown, joined as always by Todd Golden and Jack Ankeny. And guys, we were talking a little bit before we started recording. This Indiana team, just right on brand, continues to have some ups and some downs and be a little inconsistent and maybe do things that we didn't see coming. And most recently was what ended up looking like a pretty dominant win over Purdue. Yes, it was at home for Indiana. That's obviously a big deal in a rivalry game, but a 15-point win over the Boilermakers, who are still battling to maybe try to win a bit. That's looking less and less likely as they've now lost 4 in a row. But this was a game that we kind of talked about leading up to this point. That that's probably not one they're going to get, and they get the one at Michigan State, and it's been kind of a microcosm of what the whole season has been. So, Todd, I want to start with you because you've really kind of talked about this inconsistent thing all season long since we've been doing these podcasts. So, this is a good version of inconsistency, but a 15-point win over Purdue was not really what most people saw happening in this one.
Yeah, it was and the nature of it was a 28-3 runoff of the out of halftime. And Indiana deserves a lot of credit for putting defensive pressure on Braden Smith. He had, I think it was 5 turnovers in the second half. Miles Rice, I think, did a great job on Braden Smith to kind of disrupt him, and then Purdue was disrupted from there. Mike Woodson went with a smaller lineup with Luke Goody and Miles Rice and Trey Galloway all on the floor together, and it worked. So credit goes to them for sticking with it. Credit goes to the players for not giving up on the season, and so it was. And it came after a very bad end to the first half. So yeah, the inconsistency hasn't gone away, but but there's been sprites of quality here and there, and they were able to have a larger stretch of it on Sunday, and paid off.
Well, I actually got to sit down and record the Purdue version of the podcast yesterday with Dustin Schutte, another member of our parent company, I guess you could say. And Jack, I was talking to him. I was at a function during the day, so I couldn't see the first half. I caught most of the second half, and I did not realize that Indiana was down big in the first half and down 12 at halftime. When you saw the final score that they won by 15, I just kind of assumed Indiana got off to a really good start at home and just kind of rode that wave all the way through, but that was not the case. So what was going so wrong in the first half that saw them down by 12, and then as Todd just said, they just came out like crazy on a 28-3 run in the second half, but first half was a different story.
Yeah, it was competitive at the start. I think the first 10 minutes or so it was pretty much back and forth, but then Indiana went on a really rough stretch there at the end of the first half. Purdue went on a 21-4 run, and I was saying this to Todd after the game that I didn't think Indiana was playing I thought we had seen this team play a lot worse in terms of turning the ball over or not generating good shots. I thought they missed a fair amount of open shots in the first half. And I was watching the radio show yesterday with IU's assistant, Yusir Rosemond, and he's like, the guys went into halftime pretty confident that they could turn this around. And so they weren't discouraged by the first half effort. And I think in the second half, they came out, and Todd mentioned Miles Rice defense on Braden Smith. I thought that was key. I thought Anthony Leal played great defense the whole game, whether it was on Smith or Lawyer, sort of denying passes out on the perimeter. And Purdue just looked really uncomfortable throughout the entire second half, which is really rare for them. They're usually a team that can sort of establish what they want to do on offense, but Indiana's defense, credit to them, did a great job of sort of knocking them off their rhythm. And I think the key for Indiana's offense was for the second straight game against Purdue, Trey Galloway had played really well, 9 assists, 15 points. Purdue, for whatever reason, has had a tough time stopping him getting to the basket, whether it's in that pick and roll with whether it's Renew or Ballo. They combined for 27 points because Purdue doesn't really have a great shot blocker inside. So Indiana was kind of able to exploit that in the second half, I thought, with Galloway and one of the two bigs.
Well, Todd, Jack just touched on it a little bit right there, but obviously when you do the math, Purdue then outscored Indiana outscored Purdue 48-21 in the second half. I mean, that's as dominant as it gets. That just really doesn't happen to Purdue. If you look their whole schedule for the whole season, their only really bad loss was against Auburn in terms of point differential. So this is obviously pretty rare. What exactly was working for Indiana in the second half? I mean, Jack just touched on it a little bit there, but yeah, to outscore them by 27 in the second half is pretty crazy.
A lot of it came in transition off those turnovers. I mean, especially early in the first half, they were able to, I think ultimately Indiana scored 17 points off of turnovers in the second half. So that was part of it. That certainly helps to be able to score out of transition. And then they hit their 3-point shots too in the second half, and that certainly helped. And then once the boulder got rolling downhill, a lot of things were working. Purdue did not handle the adversity of not playing well very well, and Indiana was able to take advantage. So it was a lot of different things, but I think it did start with defense leading to offense, and that was a devastating combination for Purdue, and they never really took care of it.
Well, let's take a look at some of the individual performances for these guys. Jack, we'll kick it back over to you. You mentioned them already. The two bigs for Indiana, Malik Renew and Omar Ballo, almost perfect from the floor, 12 of 14. They poured in 27 points. It's rare to say that Purdue doesn't have some giant monster in the middle. They've had that for about 10 years, it seems. And they started off the season with another kid, right? Don't they have a 7'4" guy or something that got hurt? But
yeah,
with him out. Yeah, with him out, Indiana's bigs kind of had a field day, and obviously that was a big part of the win.
Yeah, and I think it's been good to see. We've talked on this podcast earlier about Malik Renew being kind of a key part to this team, and he seems like really in the last few games that he's kind of rounding in to the player that Indiana knew he could be. He went perfect 7 for 7 from the field. Yeah, Purdue. I think if I had to say the biggest concern with them in terms of long-term prospects is that they just don't really have a whole lot of guys who can deter guys, whether it's guards driving to the rim or big guys inside. They don't really have that strong defensive presence. And Indiana took advantage of that with Ballo and Renew and with Galloway. He's really turned into a great passer over the last basically year and a half, 2 seasons. So I thought that was key for Indiana.
Another good segue, Todd. If you want to take Trey Galloway's performance, he finished with 15 points and 9 assists. Jack just mentioned the passing ability there. That's a heck of a stat line for a guy who has obviously gotten better in that. That's not maybe typical for him, I guess you could say, but like Jack said, recently been a lot better in that area.
Typical when he's at his
on.
Yeah. I mean, it was just he didn't try to force anything, and that's what's been Trey's problem through most of his Indiana career. I mean, when he gets himself into trouble is when he's trying to do too much. And on Sunday, he played within himself, kept his teammates involved, obviously, with the assists, and but never really put Indiana in a bad situation in terms of throwing the ball away or anything like that, which has been a problem at times this season. So it was a very strong performance from Trey. The backcourt in general had a very good game on Sunday.
This I find interesting. Again, talking with Dustin from the Purdue side of things, on this little bit of a skid. It was 3 games, obviously, heading into this matchup with Indiana. He thought that he started to notice some real fatigue with Purdue, whether it was mental fatigue, physical fatigue, and Indiana's coming off this 9 days of rest. Jack, I just wonder if you saw the same thing. I mean, you look at 2 of the best players in the Big Ten, let alone on Purdue's team, Braden Smith, just 8 points and 6 turnovers, and Trey Kaufman-Renn, a season low 9 points. Did it look like that? I mean, I know you're not probably watching them as close as Dustin is necessarily, but did you feel a sense of maybe that was what was going on, and explain some of this, the skid that they're on right now?
Well, I think it's a fair point. And last night, Yasir Roseman said the same thing on Indiana's radio show. He's like, Braden Smith is playing a ton of minutes. He plays, I think he's averaging 36 and a half minutes. And there's been a bunch of games where he plays all 40 minutes. So, I mean, I guess I couldn't say that I was noticing fatigue, but you could notice that they put so much pressure on Smith I guess maybe not pressure, but responsibility to run their offense. They don't really have a backup point guard or someone that they feel super comfortable running the offense for long stretches of time when he's out. So I mean, he has a lot on his shoulders to really run the team, and so does Trey Kaufman-Renn and Fletcher Lawyer. That trio is outstanding and a big reason that Purdue, is another top 15, top 10 type of team this year. But when they're not getting it from all three of those guys, it makes it really tough because then the whole supporting cast has to step up. So yeah, I mean, I thought that was a real thing. I don't. It's probably more of a fatigue or putting too much on Smith type of thing. I thought with Trey Kaufman-Renn, I mean, he just picked up some fouls that, a couple on moving screens, maybe one on moving screen, and then he had one where he sort of elbowed Trey Galloway in the head, like trying to go to the basket. So I thought with him, it was more like he was never really able to sort of settle in because he was, he had some foul trouble throughout it, and Indiana was sort of able to limit him that way. But yeah, I think that's a concern for Purdue when you don't have they usually can count on one or two guys stepping up, but you don't always know who it is in terms of the supporting cast.
Yeah, sorry to jump out real quick there. I have a 5-year-old knocking on my door as he's on winter break this week. So, anyways, I just found it interesting. And Todd, I wanted to get your take on it. On the flip side, I think it was 2 or 3 games that Purdue played during that 9-game stretch or 9-day stretch, while Indiana's sitting there just resting, getting ready for a big matchup, a rivalry game. I think we talked about it last time. A ton of rest isn't always a great thing, but what do you think that did for the Hoosiers? Obviously, they got a big win. They were certainly energized enough in the second half to make the big run. Do you think that 9 days ended up being a very good thing for them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was gave them time to prepare, gave them time to put, actually work on a game plan, which you don't get really all that much time to do in college basketball or any basketball for that matter. So yeah, I don't think it hurt. It didn't seem to help Indiana much from and I don't want to make a big deal out of this, but from a health standpoint, there's still some guys banged up that didn't play as much, but it did allow them to coalesce into a plan, and they executed that plan well for most of the game on Sunday. So sure, I don't think it hurt, and at this time of the year, everybody gets a break like this during the Big Ten season, but it's nice to have it towards the end of the year when you truly need the rest. So I think in that sense, it was a good thing for Indiana for certain.
Okay, let's give both of you guys a chance to comment on the Anthony Leal-First incident. It's been received quite differently from Indiana fans and Purdue fans. Again, talking with Dustin about it yesterday, it was kind of fun. I don't have a dog in the fight. I saw it. I want to hear your guys' opinion first, and then maybe I'll throw my 2 cents in. But Jack, they get a little tangled up. It was an aggressive box out. They go to the ground, and then what do you think happened there?
Yeah, I mean, what I saw was that, hard box out from both guys. And then I thought it looked like Leal-First, you could see pretty clearly, kind of grabbed Leal's forearm when they were on the ground and kind of tangled up their legs. And then when Leal stood up, he kind of kicked back and stepped on First. And so initially they called a foul on Leal, just a common foul, and then they went and reviewed it and just didn't call anything, which that is probably what surprised me the most. I thought they would at least call something on one or both of the players. I kind of thought both players were at fault, to be honest. So it was surprising to me that nothing came of it. And the game could have been totally different if Anthony Leal, I think on the broadcast they were suggesting that maybe he could have been ejected for that, and that could have flipped the game for Indiana, because I thought Leal was huge, kind of all over the floor, had like 8 points, and then also had a bunch of rebounds, steals, and blocks. Played great defense. So that could have it could have been a different outcome depending on how that call went.
Todd, anything to add to it? Like I said, I will say, Looked like he used Leal-First as a starting block a little bit on the track and field, a little bit. But
Yeah,
I'm with Jack. I thought it was weird that they reviewed it and it was just like nothing. Like it didn't even happen. That was kind of the strange part about it. But yeah, just one of those fun Big Ten plays, right?
No question about it that was very strange. I wonder, I'd if I covered Purdue, I wonder if what Purdue sent to the Big Ten office about that. I mean, or what the Big Ten communicated to both schools about that call, because at the very least, there was some hook and holdish type stuff going on. Obviously, Leal's kick deserved something. I don't know that it deserved an ejection, but it certainly deserved a flagrant. I mean, here's where I kind of would differ with some Indiana fans who have come to Leal's defense. Now, bear in mind, too, Leal is extremely popular as a player, so he's gonna get a lot of benefit of the doubt from IU fans anyway. But everything that happened before the kickback was basketball related. It's still a hook and hold is illegal, but it's still a basketball play. You know what I mean? And taking a donkey kick back at somebody with some intent, and that's where I feel like Leal was very fortunate to get away with that. And quite honestly, it wasn't that's not a smart thing to do. If you're taking all the emotion out of it, it's IU Purdue, so there's a lot of emotion in it. So good luck with that. But from if I'm a coach, and if Leal had been, let's say he had been ejected from the game, I've been upset if I was a coach with that he didn't show more composure in that situation. As it is, nothing happened. So no harm, no foul, as they say. But I think Leal was pretty fortunate to get away with that. That was I remember Jack had the live blog, but I was tweeting, and my initial tweets were, that's because the replay they showed in Assembly Hall was not the same as the TV replays.
Okay.
Replay in Assembly Hall didn't get a lot of it. And so the fans naturally reacted to probably the more hook and hold type stuff. But and it didn't really accurately show the kick. But I had the benefit of the TV replay, and I saw that, and I was like, wow, that's going to be trouble. So yeah, I'd love to see an explanation from the Big Ten on how they officiated that and whether they had any issues with the way the officials officiated that. They like to keep that stuff under wraps, but and I don't blame Purdue fans for being a little bit upset about that. Although I do think, like I said, the basketball stuff probably was was equal parts both, but it was the extracurricular stuff, was probably more on Leal. So a lot of IU fans don't want to hear that. I'll tell you what, though, some have acknowledged basically the view I have, that Leal was pretty fortunate to get away with it. But as it was, they didn't call anything. Both players went on to keep playing, and it's something fun to talk about. But that was a weird one. That's no doubt about it.
A donkey kick to the Boilermakers in that rivalry game. How about that? Who out there had donkey kick on the bingo card for the podcast today? Because I did not see that. But that's pretty close. That's pretty much what it was.
Come out of my mouth. So,
well, speaking of the fans, obviously that little tangle up and moment had both fan bases kind of giving their opinions and feeling differently about it. I didn't know about this until we jumped on here today, and you guys informed me that Matt Painter, head coach of Purdue, had some pretty interesting things to say about the Indiana fan base. Jack, you kind of described it as he kind of started out with the coach speak thing. I don't really want to get into it, and then just kind of got going for whatever reason. And I think you even said we got a little fired up about it for various reasons. So what did Matt Painter say after the game that that seemed to be pretty quote worthy at this point?
Yeah, so he was pretty much just asked about like his thoughts on the Indiana job opening and sort of where the job stands in college basketball, because I think there's been some debate about like how good of a job really is it if Indiana hasn't had a ton of modern day success, but they have a lot of historical success. So yeah, he started out sort of just like, I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on the job. But then he got kind of riled up saying like, don't beat yourself. Let's support somebody. Try that out every now and then. When stuff goes wrong, you know, you know, support your coach, support your players. And he was like, I thought this was kind of a funny quote. He's like, a fan base isn't the people that tweet. A fan base is the people that when you're bleeding, they support you. And he's like, then he also went in to talk about how fans can kind of, they get Indiana gets these recruits and they build them up to be like they're Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, and then they come to Indiana and they're not Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, and people are disappointed. So I think he made a lot of good points. I think the one thing that I would push back on is like, I think Indiana's right to have high expectations and for fans to be upset when things aren't going well, because they haven't gone well for a lot of recent seasons. So I think he touched on a lot of good points and things that maybe Indiana has to look itself in the mirror and fix with the next coach. But I also think he maybe didn't give the full picture in terms of, expectations are high at Indiana for good reason, and I don't think they should really lower expectations are what are different for each person. Should they expect to win a national championship in the first year of the next coach? No, but like I don't think in general Indiana should all of a sudden look at it and be like, oh yeah, we're just happy to get in the tournament, or we're happy with a moderate level of success every season. So yeah, I think he had a lot of great things to say, and it certainly seemed to fire up a lot of people.
Well, on the other sideline, you obviously had Mike Woodson getting a big win over Purdue, and probably their last matchup, unless they somehow meet in the Big Ten tournament, the seniors as well. You never know what's going to happen with the roster, with a coaching change. So kind of a storyline there. Todd, I guess just, the thoughts on how Mike Woodson did in this game in particular, and Purdue against Purdue over his career, and just kind of what that meant to get a big win like that in the rivalry. As he is, again, they're kind of fighting for their tournament life at this point. That was obviously a good win in that regard. So just kind of the thoughts on Mike Woodson putting a bow on that series against Purdue.
Yeah, it was his fourth career win over Purdue, fourth in the last 2 or 3 seasons. Last year's games were not good, but the year before that, he swept Purdue when they were number 1 in the country on one of those games. So he's had it's part of the bizarre kind of tale of Mike Woodson as coach. He's been pretty good against Purdue, pretty good against Ohio State, up until this year, pretty good against Michigan. Really bad against Northwestern, really bad against Nebraska. Penn State is coming here on Wednesday. They have won the last 2 against them, but 4 in a row, losing to Penn State before that. So it's just, just part of the deal with Mike Woodson. Who would have thought, we mentioned it, that they would have won at Michigan State a couple of weeks ago. So, he's had high moments and he's had some really low moments. And this is one of the higher ones. Of course, there was the emotional appeal of sitting in Bob Knight's chair that he threw 40 years ago. So that was kind of a neat callback to that period. Bob Knight threw that chair against Purdue in 1985. So the game that IU lost, people forget that, but or maybe they don't. I don't know. But anyway, it was nice. I'm sure Woodson enjoyed it. It's been tough on him since this happened. Of course, some things he's made tough on himself, like not doing radio interviews. But so it was a good moment, and I did want to touch on the Painter comments. I wanted to take a shot at that as well. I think thinking about it, I mean, he was definitely talking about IU fans, no question about it. But what I do think he was sort of using IU fans to do is to make a greater comment about the discourse in college basketball. He's not wrong about Twitter not representing the fan base. Social media does not. It represents a vocal part of the fan base who is willing to, or who wants to go out there and say stuff on the internet. It's not, and never has been, a majority of people. Sometimes we in the media make the mistake of representing that as the majority. It is definitely not. So I think IU fans are certainly part of that, but Purdue fans are can be vitriolic on social media. All fan bases can be. Now, Indiana fans are right up there near the top of vitriol. We see it all the time with our own stuff that we post. Some of the comments we get are a little over the top in terms of vitriol and all that. So, and I do think that has an impact. There were rumors that that Liam McNeely was upset with that last year and was part of his decommitment. I don't know if it's true or not. It was a rumor, but it doesn't help. And I think the bigger thing that Painter said that I liked was the thing about recruits. Indiana fans, and I'm sure it's just, again, I think he was making a larger point about using Indiana to make a larger point. All fans hype up recruits and new players coming in. I think it had a lot to do with the perception of this team this year for some players who probably hadn't earned that level of hype. We hear how talented Indiana was coming in this year. Well, some of those players have lived up to it. Many have not. And you look at what the hype was based on, and it was pretty thin veneer of evidence. So I thought that was I hope if there's anything that fans take to heart from his comments, it's the thing about just wait and see what you have in terms of players. It's fine to get excited about players, but there is an element of building them up and knocking them down, both among fans and the media. We're part of it too. But so I thought it was interesting that he used that opportunity to say it. Matt is a intelligent person who, and to be fair, and I think he may have alluded to this in his comments. Purdue is probably going to be on the wrong end of some of those comments after you lose a game to your arch rivals. It's social media is not the real world, and sometimes we'd like to make it to be. And do I wish people would chill on social media? Yeah, I know they're not going to, but it's okay to call that out, and it's interesting to see what fans probably won't do anything, but it was interesting that Painter mentioned it.
Yeah, I was gonna say to what Jack said, not even basketball, just the whole world. He said, just try supporting someone for once. Like he's kind of using that stage to put a much bigger message out there. I agree. Just hearing how it kind of came about and some of the things he said. Yeah, it doesn't sound like it was Indiana specific, but it worked in this setting.
I don't want to be old man yells at cloud too much, but it is a little rougher than it used to be in terms of one of the teams I follow is currently in first place. This is soccer we're talking about, so there's promotion involved, and you still have people all over the coach, and it's I don't know what part of human nature that appeals to freak out about every last bit of adversity, but it does happen, and it makes you wonder how people deal with real adversity in their lives sometimes. But I also do think it's also part of, you can amplify your venting a lot more than you could when I was young, and it's just the nature of social media and all things. But so, yeah, I mean, you're no question about it that it does happen. It isn't just IU fans.
Yeah.
Well, and just to add, I wanted to add one last thing about that note. I mean, I thought it was interesting last night on the radio show with Yasir Rosemont. He was talking about how, he said, just reading his quote here, he said, I think some of the stuff that went on with the crowd, like probably referencing, when they got booed and stuff against Illinois and the Fire Woodson chants, he's like, he said, those are things I think people that didn't grow up in Indiana or guys that when you're in the portal, they don't really understand. Basketball is king in Indiana, and if you don't understand that, sometimes the stuff can get to you. I think that happened to a couple of our guys. So he's basically saying there that some of the negativity can get to the players, and so I think it's a real factor, and maybe Indiana needs to do a better job of blocking that out or getting guys that understand that. But I think it's fair to say that it's a factor that can, for as great as the Indiana fan base is and how much that helps the program, there's also, a dark side to it too, I think.
No question. Although I will say that be realistic on the other side of things too. They were getting tarred and feathered by Illinois in that game, and I mean, if that
Oh, yeah.
happens as a coach, you got to, does it suck to hear boos?
Mm.
Absolutely, but there are times when you gotta, shrug that off, and certainly that Illinois game isn't like if they had been booed, they did get booed on Sunday. You could hear it from the students after they blew the lead. I thought it was understandable. Booing to me is a little bit different than social media stuff. That's in person, and the people you're aiming it at are going to, hear it. But there's a balance to walk. I mean, if you're getting beat by 25 and you get, I mean, hey, you brought that on yourself. But if you're losing by 2 and getting booed, then maybe the fans are overdoing it. So it's interesting that Yasir said that. But so yeah, it's just the nature of playing sports, I suppose.
Yeah.
Todd, I would like to refer to you again on this next topic here. You alluded to it already, but the infamous Bob Knight chair throw, 1985. You said 1985.
Yep.
So I was a year old. Jack, I don't think you were even a twinkle in your parents' eye yet at this moment. I don't know exactly how old you are, but I think you're quite a bit younger than me. So, Todd, I'm going to defer to you on this. You are the expert.
Guy, in other words. Yeah, just say it.
I didn't want to say it like that. I'm not going to put your business in the streets. But no, obviously, I mean, anybody who's ever watched college basketball has seen that clip, whether you were alive at the time or not. And you just talked about it a little bit. Mike Woodson sitting in the Bob Knight chair. I didn't even know this was a thing, so I'm interested to hear about this a little bit. And then there were some other scenes at Assembly Hall again after a big win over a rival. The team kind of rallying around Mike Woodson a little bit. Just kind of talk about how all of that was again, and what is probably the last matchup for Mike Woodson in this version of Indiana against Purdue.
Yeah, Mike presented some claims that was the real actual chair that Bob Knight threw, based on some of the former coaches who gathered it after the game. Sure. I mean, I don't know how you could prove a plastic chair is the real thing, but print the legend, so to speak. It's no harm done in that. And it was interesting that the players kind of rallied around Woodson when he was doing his TV interview after the game. I don't know if did that TV interview ever even air. I went looking for it because CBS cut away from that game really quickly afterwards. I forget which game they were going to after that game. I don't even know if that actually aired on TV or not. If it did,
I didn't see anything about it on TV.
Yeah,
no.
I mean, it was after my DVR ran out, but. So
yeah, I saw a clip of the interview on Twitter, but I think you're right about the TV broadcast. They basically pretty much cut to UCLA, Ohio State right after.
Yeah, they did a little bit. They kind of called back the game in their studio thing, but I didn't have the benefit of anything after that. So, but we saw it. I mean, we saw the players rally around the players, or the players rally around Mike Woodson. So, they've all endured the criticism at some level. So in terms of kind of circling the wagons, Mike Woodson and the players are in the same boat. So, there's not really, I know some fans will think, well, maybe the players are looking at other things and all that, and they probably are, but you could do two things at once. You can focus on the here and now, which none of these players are going anywhere before the season is over. So you might as well make the most of it. And then, once the season is over, then they can think about themselves. So the players do genuinely seem to want to play for Mike Woodson through the rest of the season. So, but it was interesting. The public display of it was probably an eye opener for some fans who feel like, everybody's kind of to each their own type of mentality and stuff like that. So, we'll see. I mean, but like I said, in the video that Jack and I did after the game, this game is only as good as what you do in the next one. So they go and lose to Penn State tomorrow night. That's going to negate a lot of the good that they did in beating Purdue.
That's exactly where I was going to go next, Jack. What does this mean now for Indiana going forward? I mean, it's a great win. It adds to the quad one win total. I think we'll get to their tournament chances and kind of where they're at right now, maybe in the next couple of minutes. But yeah, I mean, like Todd, this is the perfect pattern would be for then to Indiana to now lose to Penn State. Which, like, we've seen that all year. They beat a team they shouldn't, and they lose the game that they probably maybe had a better chance. So coming off of a big win over Purdue, what does that mean moving forward, and how do you see this next one going?
Yeah, I think it's a good confidence builder for Indiana. I think, to their credit, they've sort of just taken this as, the season is not over if we don't want it to be. Um, and so, I think I remember Woodson talking about, like, before that Michigan State game, like, hey, we just need to get a win or two under our belt to start feeling good. And so, maybe they can turn it into something else. You mentioned, what you said leading into this question, and it reminded me of a few seasons ago when they won at Purdue and then came back and lost by like 20 at home to Iowa. And it was sort of just that, right when you thought they were turning it around, a big loss. So they can't get too, confident and relaxed to that point. But I don't think this team will. They've got a lot of veterans and leaders and things like that who I think will recognize that, hey, like, just because we won this game, it can all go to waste later on. I saw some tournament projections that had them in the field, and then I saw Lenardi's bracketology today had them as one of the first four out. So yeah, they still have work to do. The schedule, this 4-game stretch looks about as favorable as Indiana has had basically since, like, non-conference play. Home against Penn State, then at Oregon, at Washington, and home Ohio State. So the opportunities are there if Indiana probably needs to win 2 or 3 of these, and then maybe a game or two in the Big Ten tournament. If I were to take a guess at that.
Yeah, you've got Washington and Penn State bringing up the rear in the Big Ten. I mean, that certainly helps Indiana's chances for these last 4. So what do you think about that now, Todd? I feel like I said, you beat Michigan State, now you beat Purdue, and it feels like, there's a little bit of a tournament push here, but there are 4 games left. Again, 2 of them on paper, I would assume Indiana will be favored over both Washington and Penn State. But what does the tournament chance feel like at this point? Do you think this is? I think I asked this maybe 3 weeks ago. Is this a tournament team? And I think both of you said no at that time. Is it a little different now?
It is different. I still don't. If you're asking me whether they're a tournament quality team, I'd still say no.
That doesn't mean they might not make it. They might make it. Okay, I see what you did there.
The bubble, I mean, I wrote about it yesterday. The bubble is really soft. I mean, that's definitely helping Indiana's cause. There's no doubt about it. When you're fighting with teams that are still in the bubble that only have 1 or 2 quad 1 wins, I mean, Indiana right now has 4, so they stand above that. But it's probably more of an indictment of how they choose the field than any quality among those teams down fighting for NCAA tournament position. But having said all that, regardless, Indiana is in the mix. So they still have more to prove to me. I mean, Penn State has actually won their last 2 games, and they're playing better. So should Indiana beat them at home? Absolutely they should, but that doesn't mean they will. And, so they can't let their guard down. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, and, let's be honest. I mean, a trip out to the West Coast is no matter what the caliber of opponent you're playing is not going to be easy. And so I'm curious to see how, IU does not have trips like this where they go, where they have to actually stay out. It's more like an NCAA tournament trip where they're going to be on the West Coast for close to 5 days or something like that. So that'll be interesting. A lot of Big Ten teams have been tripped up by this West Coast trip, just as the West Coast teams have been tripped up occasionally. So I'm curious to see how they handle that. It probably helps they play Washington first. Washington has definitely struggled this year. Beating Oregon and Eugene is not going to be easy. Oregon's a quality team. They just beat Wisconsin and Madison over the weekend. So they're still, and then they finished with Ohio State at home, and who knows what Ohio State team you're going to all over the place. But so there's still work to do. And as Jack said, they probably need to win at least one Big Ten tournament game. I would think they would need to win at least 2 yet to truly put themselves in an advantageous spot. So the win over Purdue was necessary to put them in the position to have something to fight for, but there's still plenty of fight left. And we'll see how Indiana responds to whether they can string together some wins. I'll say this: they did finish last year well when put in a similar situation. They probably weren't as close to the tournament last year, but they did win 5 in a row right at the end when it seemed like they were on their way to finishing. I forget what their worst Big Ten record was last year, but it was trending towards finishing near the bottom of the league, and they pulled it together and ended up finishing 10-10. So it'll be tough to get to 10-10. Well, this year, but they do seem to have it in them at the end of seasons to put runs together. So we'll see.
Jack, what do you think is the most likely outcome for these final four? Is it 2-2? Do you go 500 and feel pretty good about that? Do you say, I mean, we just beat one of the best teams in the league, let's go 4-0 and win all of them? Because I mean, this is not a gauntlet of opponents. I mean, is it feasible to go 4-0? Is what's more likely? Just kind of how do you see it? The last four.
Yeah, I mean, I guess probably the most likely I would say is maybe 2-2, but I think 3-1. Like if I were to predict it right now, I'd probably say 3-1. I mean, I think you should definitely win tomorrow against Penn State, and then like Todd mentioned, starting the West Coast road trip against Washington is favorable than the reverse. The game at Oregon is going to be tough. They just beat Wisconsin. They got a really good team, and then that's the second half of the road trip. And then, I just don't see Indiana really losing at home to Ohio State. I mean, we've talked so much about this team being hard to predict, so it wouldn't surprise me. But if I had to predict that Ohio State game, senior day home game against a team that you've already beaten.
Woodson's last game there, probably. Or for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think 3-1 is very possible. I might say that 2-2 is the most realistic, because we just can't quite trust this team on a consistent basis. So yeah, it's tough to say, but yeah.
You know what popped into my head when you were saying that, Jack?
Yeah.
The pregame intro video that they showed at Assembly Hall with all the recent former coaches in it, and thinking to myself, Indiana, they need to go 3-1. They can't afford to. Frankly, they can't afford to go 2-2.
Yeah,
but I think they will go 2-2. And I have that Tom Crean. It's Indiana. It's Indiana. We this team cannot be trusted yet just because they beat Purdue.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We'll see. I think they absolutely to put themselves in a tournament position. I don't think they can afford to go 2-2. Especially when you figure one of those two losses is going to be a bad loss. I mean, losing at Oregon is understandable. Losing to losing at home to Ohio State or Penn State, and losing it all to Washington is going to do a lot of damage. So they have to go 3-1, but it's Indiana, so we'll see what they actually do.
It's Indiana.
I don't know if that's what Crean meant, but that's
I'm sorry, Tom, but it's Indiana. I mean, why should we trust this team yet? I mean, they'll do something crazy like beat Oregon and lose all three of the other games.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the ride that this team has taken us on tells us that we have no idea where they're going.
Yeah.
I think the other thing to note is too, like, if they go 3-1, they're probably playing on Thursday in the Big Ten tournament. If they go 2-2, they're probably playing on Wednesday. Just kind of, it's hard to project because all these teams are so close. But if you go 2-2, then maybe you have a better chance of picking up multiple wins in the Big Ten tournament. So then I don't know if
it's interesting.
If 4-2 with 2 Big Ten tournament wins is better than 4 wins with 3 being in the regular season and 1 in the Big Ten tournament, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
We won't know because of the matchups and stuff and who those wins are against. But I was just sort of thinking that too, because they're right on that cut line kind of the Wednesday, Thursday Big Ten tournament with all those teams. I mean, it looks like there's 7 teams with 7 or 6 Big Ten wins right now. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and the optics too of winning a couple games a little later, as opposed to however these last 4 games go. Yeah, that's funny. I mean, you've got 4 games left, and you're trying to predict is that 2-2. That's what they'll do. That's what they've been doing all year. It's been a little bit inconsistent. Oh man, Well, we will see. So it's what, tomorrow night? Tomorrow night.
Yep.
Penn State at Indiana. What time's that on? 8:30 Eastern. 8:30 Eastern looks like. So a little bit of a late game there, but yeah, that's that got to get that one. Got to get Washington, bringing up the rear of the Big Ten, and then at Oregon's tough, and then you close out with another pretty inconsistent up and down kind of team in Ohio State. That one probably could go either way. So we shall see how Indiana finishes out the season. We'll be back to talk with these guys on Tuesday. So at that point, what will we have to talk about? The Penn State game and the Washington game? Is that right? Both?
Yeah.
Thursday and then Saturday. Yeah. So we'll be back on Tuesday to talk about those two games before Indiana gets ready to put a bow on the regular season. Todd Golden and Jack Ankeny. I am Brandon Brown. Thanks, everybody out there, for listening.